Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build. Billy, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for joining us today. Where's home base for you? Where are you located?
Fredericksburg, Virginia, just outside of Quantico area near Lake Anna.
Awesome. So, right before recording started, before we did this round two, I was asking you about atmosphere in that area, being next to Quantico. Love to hear the perspective on, if you feel it day to day, government, military presence in the area.
Yeah, it's actually really nice being near Quantico. You run into a lot more veterans, so it kind of keeps you at that, where you're comfortable, right? I'm around people that are similar minded or like minded, that have that same work ethic or goals. I'm still near some of my friends from when I served, which is nice.
That's really awesome. I love to hear that. Glad to hear that you're feeling that from the community being there. Awesome, man. So I'm going to kick off with your formal introduction. Billy Kimball served for 10 years in the Marine Corps infantry, both as enlisted and as an officer. Billy has 2 Marine Expeditionary Unit MEU deployments in 2011 and in 2012. Today, Billy is a commercial construction senior project manager. Last but definitely not least, Billy is a husband, has 2 dogs, and competes in amateur bodybuilding. All right, Billy. So as the audience knows, we like to start off in chronological order. Let's talk about childhood, where you grew up, and what in your childhood led you to service.
Yeah. So I was born in California, Alameda County, on base. So my dad was in the Navy for 26 years. So born there, moved kind of all over. I think I lived in 10 or 11 states growing up as a kid. So military for me always kind of ran in the family. My uncle was in the Marine Corps. My grandfather was in the Army, served in Vietnam. My father did 26 years and retired from the Navy. For me, it was inevitable that I wanted to go into the military. I wanted to serve. I wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself. I tell a weird story about my career, but to me, it's always a fun one to tell. Is I knew all that growing up. I loved to shoot, and I wanted to be in the military. But really, my childhood dream was to go to Annapolis and go to the Naval Academy. But it was because I watched the movie Annapolis with Tyrese Gibson, and I loved the movie. And I told my dad, "It's like I want to go to the Naval Academy. I want to figure out how to go there." We didn't grow up with a lot of money. I wasn't extremely intellectual. I wasn't into a lot of sports or anything else growing up. So when I did apply to the Naval Academy, I actually didn't get in. The military as a whole, that's something I knew I wanted to do. And when I got denied from the Naval Academy, I was talking to my dad. I was like, well, I don't really want to go into the Navy, right? I wanted to go to the Naval Academy. It looked cool. I really liked the movie. But I didn't want to go into the Navy. I didn't want to be on a ship. And I grew up shooting. So I started shooting when I was 11, wanted to be a scout sniper. So I decided, I want to go into the Marine Corps. I had a recruiter who was in the Marine Corps, who met with me my senior year of high school. I joined MEPS, just before my senior year. He actually picked me up from school every single day, to work out. I still keep up with the guy today. Amazing recruiter, amazing Marine. He retired after 20 years. But he really cared about the people he brought into the military, and that really changed my perspective as a whole about what that environment was, because I wasn't physically fit. I could not, when I went to MEPS, I could not do a pull-up. So I had to go a second time after he got me to be able to do 2 pull-ups. I was a very unathletic person. So the military as a whole, him being as engaged as he was really helped change my perspective and my drive to want to do better and be a part of that, because I knew it wasn't going to be an easy journey. So I spent all of high school, senior year, focused on being ready to go to boot camp and being able to do 3 pull-ups before I got there, which was unique.
Love hearing that. Love hearing that about the recruiter. and especially that you keep in touch with them today. I think that's really nice. It's unique. The more you'd hear such a thing, the better. I think, just generally speaking, environment would be, community would be. So that's really nice to hear. Out of curiosity, before you continue with your story, did your grandfather tell you anything about his service?
The only thing he had told me was right before I joined the Marine Corps, we had conversations about some of the stuff he saw in Vietnam. And, he really emphasized on not letting that, if I ever had to go see anything like that, to not let that affect my family or my home life. Ironically enough, and we'll get, eventually get to that portion of my career being in commercial construction. He was in steel construction. So growing up during the summer, I worked in steel construction with him. And he actually told me never to get back into construction because he did the physical part, right? So he did the manual labor, steel construction. And, so we talked a little bit about it. He actually got 2 Purple Hearts in Vietnam. He went down. He was actually survived 2 helicopter crashes on different occasions in Vietnam. So he was a great mentor to me growing up until the day he passed. So he passed while I was at the Naval Academy, and he was just as close to me as my dad is right now.
Oh yeah, sounds like an amazing person, an amazing mentor to have growing up. Glad to see that you followed in his footsteps in both ways, right? Military and career.
Yeah, absolutely. So
awesome. So what happens next? So you start. I guess that's when you're 17, right?
17 years old. I turned 18 about a month before I left for boot camp. So went into the Marine Corps. I think I was able to do about 3 pull-ups when I first got to boot camp. Came out probably doing 6 or 7. I was, I'm 6'3". At the time, I was 154 pounds when I showed up to boot camp. Today, I'm 240. Right, to give people perspective of where I've grown. So went to boot camp, infantry contract. For me, that any MOS has the ability to go to sniper school, or had the ability. Sniper schools now been they just finished their last class and had that closing ceremony. But went into the infantry, went through ITB, Infantry Training Battalion. Did well there. I was a normal rifleman when I got to the fleet. But in the back of my mind, while I was going through all this, I still had my recruiter that I regularly reached out to. And, one of the things he had said to me is like, you're a hard worker, you're a smart kid. If you want to go to the academy, just because you enlisted doesn't mean you should stop trying to do that. So my dad and my recruiter gave me that same sentiment, which is don't get caught up in the fun of being enlisted. Can be a very fun lifestyle. But there are bigger things out there and bigger ways to change the future. And for me, being enlisted was that motivator to want to go to the academy and become an officer, because there are some not so good things about being enlisted. And when you've experienced some of those and you become an officer, you can hopefully help change some of those experiences for someone new coming into that life. So in the back of my head, I always focused on that. I always focused on how do I get to the academy? How do I go help others? And how do I change the environment we're in? Because your job to me as an officer was truly serving those below you. And it's not your career. It's how do I help the guys that are doing all the work?
That's awesome. Well, but before we get there, talk to us a little bit about, what basic training was like going through pipeline to get into your unit.
The only thing that basic training for me, I did ROTC for 4 years in high school. I did drill team in high school, drill movements, the basic rifleman stuff, marksmanship. For me, all felt simple. Definitely a very stressful environment to be in, but it was an opportunity for me to help some of the others who hadn't experienced any of that in life. So for me, I just saw it as another way I can help some of the guys with me. The biggest thing I remember about going through boot camp was the crucible. I think that's every Marine's, that stays with them for a long time. I still have a challenge coin up on my wall from the crucible from when I went. So I've got all my challenge coins on the wall throughout my time. But that experience, when you get to the end and you go through and you have your formation in front of the Iwo Jima Memorial, and you get handed your Eagle, Globe, and Anchor and say you're a Marine, like every single, I don't care who you are, how big you are, every single Marine at that ceremony cries, right? Because you just finished the longest 4 or 5 days of your life of no sleeping, no eating, depending on the weather, if you were cold or depending on how hot it was. I mean, it was just, it was an experience that you'll never forget. And sometimes those worst experiences are the best memories that you would ever have.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Totally can relate. What camp were you at? What basic training camp were you at?
Paris Island.
Hmm.
So
What's your take on the two camps?
both have their challenges.
Yeah.
My cousin, who's at the Naval Academy right now, following in my footsteps,
Awesome.
who also was an enlisted infantry marine, I believe was in California. So they both have their experiences, their challenges. I've heard about both, but I'm always going to say that Paris Island made the real Marines, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess you have to, right? I mean, depending where you come
Absolutely.
from, that's what you're gonna have to say.
Exactly. So it was definitely, we got all the sand fleas down there. It's, it's just terrible. So
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's good banter, good memory.
absolutely.
All right, awesome. So you finish basic, you get through unit, and are you basically immediately looking to Naval Academy?
So when I I got to 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, will always be my first unit, Pale Horse 3-2. Um, the memories I have there just are amazing. But I got to that unit right after my unit got back from Afghanistan. So they had just come back. They hadn't been there, been home for more than a month, maybe. So as a new Marine, 2010, they just came off a 7-month deployment. They lost a lot of really good Marines and corpsmen. It was a challenge, right? There were, I think, 12 guys that came from my ITB class that got there. It's a weird situation to be in. A lot of the guys from my ITB class actually went to Hawaii and got sent to Afghanistan a month later. So we were kind of in that interim where we're with a group of guys who don't want to be around us. They don't want to be around anyone. They just went through absolute hell. And they're still trying to figure out how to come back to reality and live with their family and be at home.
Yeah.
So when I first got there, that was still in the back of my mind. But at the time that I would have been finishing ITB, I think this was January that I got to the fleet. Applications weren't due until June, July timeframe. So I did start my application, and that was my second round of application. So it actually took me three years of applications to get into the Naval Academy. So
Good for you. Good, man, good for you on the perseverance. I think that's really awesome that you just stuck with it. You clearly also had really good advice, right? Coming from your family, coming from the, enlistment officer that helped you. Really cool.
absolutely. So, it's a really cool story. The people that you meet along the way, some of those people stay with you for a lifetime. And so I finished my second application. And actually, the Naval Academy has what's called a preliminary application and then a full application. They didn't even accept my preliminary application. So if they don't accept your preliminary, they won't even let you do the full application status. So my second time applying, I didn't even get to do a full application. And in March of that year, my battalion was on what was called Air Contingency Battalion at the time, which is when a unit deploys from the United States for emergency operations. So when I got there, we're immediately prepping as if we're going to leave with a bunch of guys that had just gotten off deployment. And sure enough, in March of that year, we get deployed overseas. So that was a lot of things going on with the political climate over the Gaza Strip. There were just a lot of little things that were going on, and they just took a unit off of a MEU and sent them into Afghanistan to reinforce. And so then they called us, and one week I'm sitting on my bed, and the next day I'm sitting in Greece getting ready to board another aircraft to fly over to get on a ship just outside of Libya. So it
And
was kind of
what was the time frame between joining your unit and this deployment?
3 months.
Like 3 months? Oh wow, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So we just gotten our stuff from SIF and we were
Mm-hmm.
doing inspections for this air contingency battalion. And then by, I think January is when I got there. And I believe
Right.
mid-March is when we went overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And we were, I think the ship I was on was USS Ponce, which is now retired. It should have been retired 10 years before we got on it. That's about how every ship we have in the fleet is. And we spent 3.5 months on a boat and then came home. I think there were a couple. It's hard to mix up. You mix up deployments really quickly, but
Sure.
if I remember correctly, that was when we had Operation Odyssey Dawn, which is when we fired a lot of Tomahawk missiles into Libya to declare the no-fly zone
Mm.
going on. So I was a part of that operation. Really cool as a 18-year-old kid sitting on top of a flight deck watching missiles fly into a country. Um, you go back and think about the destruction that could have caused. There's a lot of things that you don't think about when you're that age and you're just there to do a job, right?
Yeah. Right. At that point, did you feel that you integrated with the team?
By the end of that 3 months,
Yeah.
I felt a lot more integrated because we'd been out there with them a little while. We'd gotten to know them as Marines.
Mm-hmm.
We got to learn from them. Some of the guys that trained me, or I think not my team leader, but my one of my buddies or my roommate's team leaders had actually gotten shot in the knee while he was in Afghanistan. So we're learning from guys that had just experienced real combat and had
Mm-hmm.
gone through some decent trauma, and they really were there to try and teach you how to learn to protect the guy that was next to you, right?
Yeah.
That's not an easy thing to teach if you haven't experienced it, and so to have that type of mentorship, um, it was phenomenal. I mean, my team leader, Lance Corporal Saunders, great guy. He would work you to the bone, but I tell you what, you'd be the best one. I was the best saw gunner in that company. I guarantee it. And
Mm-hmm.
me and my friends would fight about that all day. And when I got to TV or after the Naval Academy, I get back into the Marine Corps. I could still take apart a saw and put it back together with my eyes closed, blindfolded. It didn't matter. I could still do it. In fact, we did an event while I was at Quantico where we're taking apart the 240 and we're taking apart 249s, and I closed my eyes and did it with one hand on the 240 just to prove that's that muscle memory stuck. I was gonna
Yeah,
if
man.
we had to go to combat, I guarantee I'd be the guy ready to go.
Yeah.
For that
Well, one hand
equipment.
is that's pretty impressive. You got me there.
So it definitely took longer than the 2 minutes they give you to do it,
Sure.
but so,
One hand nonetheless.
yeah,
so,
absolutely.
so you get back from this deployment. What happens next?
So at the time we were getting ready for a workup to Afghanistan. The training schedule changed. They selected a different unit to go on to Afghanistan, and then our unit was selected to go on another MEU deployment. So 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit deployment, leaving in March of 2012. So at that time, I got ready for the Scout Sniper indoc that they were doing. I did. I went through the indoc. It's a 2-week indoc at the time. Again, some of my best memories. It was 2 weeks of absolute hell. I did not make it into the platoon. It was a great learning experience between the land navigation and the lack of sleep and everything else that you really go through to really test yourself on a physical level. I did not get into that platoon, but shortly after they had developed a platoon, they changed the name of it in every unit just about. We were called Trailer Platoon. So it was supposed to be a Force Recon support platoon, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So the MEU deployment gets a whole lot of different assets and resources. One of the resources we got was a recon team or force reconnaissance team. I still keep up with some of the guys there. One of them that I was good friends with just got out, and he's actually going into politics right now. But
Love to hear it, man.
we were attached with them. It was made up of 26 guys, 2 squads, 13 in each squad, and it was just a whole lot of different training. We did close quarters combat training. We did a few guys went and did Hearstmaster. We did all sorts of different things that as a regular rifleman you would just never get to do because of how much money it cost. I mean, we had a week at the range where we did CQB operations. We went through 1,000 rounds a day per person. I mean, your hands were bleeding from jamming magazines all day long and just going out to shoot. And we did that for almost 2 weeks straight.
So this is the workup for the next deployment.
Work up for the next deployment, get ready to go out. And so that 6 to 9 months roughly of getting ready for that was a great time, great experience. We get out on deployment and we went just about everywhere you can think of for Middle East other than Afghanistan and Iraq. So I spent some time in Kuwait. We went to Saudi Arabia. The MEU went to Dubai. It went to Bahrain. We went through the Straits of Gibraltar. I mean, we went all over, depending on where we were needed. We had a couple standby missions just outside of Yemen. So we spent 3 or 4 weeks in Djibouti supporting the Force Recon team. Never ended up needing us. That's kind of the game you play, right? It's always be ready to go, but hopefully you're not needed. So we did a lot of that. We did a lot of anti-piracy training on deployment and before deployment. That was some of the coolest things I've ever done was getting to work with a Navy SEAL team as a Lance Corporal doing anti-piracy missions. And I remember being paired up with a Navy SEAL running through this training simulation because his partner got shot as soon as they boarded the ship. And I just, as a 19-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid, I'm running next to a Navy SEAL who's been doing it for 10 years. I'm like, this is the best thing ever. I'm watching him. I'm not even paying attention to what's going on.
That's a really great experience.
But at the same time, my platoon commander knew that I wanted to go to the Naval Academy, and that's when I had met still a good friend of mine today. I think he's still in as a major or a lieutenant colonel now. But I met him. He call him Captain Monahan was the time frame I met him. He was a platoon commander. He had enlisted in the Marine Corps, in the infantry, went to the Naval Academy, came back as a Marine infantry officer. There's a very small amount of people who've taken that path, and my platoon commander knew him, set me up with him, and while we were on that deployment, he helped me with my application. So we did my preliminary application while on that deployment. I actually did my flight or my physical that the Naval Academy requires, which at the time was kind of weird. They make you sit on your knees and throw a basketball and measure the distance. I mean, there's a bunch of random different things that they would make you do for the physical. And I was doing that on the top of a flight deck.
That's awesome.
So just
very fitting.
Just trying to get the application done. I'm pretty sure that basketball is in the middle of the ocean still somewhere. It catches a wind. No one's stopping it once it gets there. You're just measuring where it bounced and that thing's going because we were doing 20 knots, on a massive ship while on deployment. But I had to get the test done and get it submitted with my application because at the time they had finally accepted my preliminary application to allow me to do my formal application.
Well, why was it why is it unique for Marines to go to the Naval Academy and then back? Just hearing it, it sounds like that would be, I don't know, just more frequent.
Unfortunately, a lot of Marines don't know that process exists. The Naval Academy has so many slots for active duty personnel to go to the Naval Academy. I think my class had 12 prior enlisted Marines in it. So you have a class of about 250 to 300 people. Let me trying to do. Sorry, that's NAP. So you have a class of about 1,200 people that get into the academy every year that go to the academy. So out of that, they might have 100 slots for active duty personnel to apply.
Mm-hmm.
But the trick with being active duty is you have to be under the age of 22. You still have to take ACT or SAT. You have to get your command to endorse you. So there's just a bunch of little things that you have to do and certain time frames you have to do it in to get in. And not enough people try or know about it early enough to apply.
Got it.
So if I hadn't got accepted on that year that I applied while on that deployment, I would have missed my shot for the following
Mm-hmm.
year because I would have aged out.
Yeah.
So they don't allow you to be married, allow you to have kids, and they don't allow you to be over the age of 22. Previously they did a few age waivers. I actually had a corpsman friend that was in with me, and he was 23 when he got to the academy. So there's some very strict requirements that most officers don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, they think that you have to apply for a different officer program. The Naval Academy is its own officer program, and so you don't have to apply for any other program to get there. You apply directly to the academy. And there's just not enough active duty military personnel who know that or take advantage of it for them to get accepted.
I see. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the awareness in combination with the factors that are required to apply. I mean, it's definitely clearly pretty rigorous, especially when you're on active duty. I mean, that's definitely not easy.
No, it's not. And I mean, that's what it took for me. It was finding a person that happened
Mm-hmm.
to follow that exact same path and getting him to help me with the application to get accepted. And
Yeah.
then after getting accepted, because I'd been out of high school and everything else for so long, I actually went to the Naval Academy Prep School for a year
Mm-hmm.
up in Rhode Island. So they send you to prep school for a year to basically get your grades up, get you back into a school environment. The whole time you're technically still on active duty. So I still got paid as a corporal. I actually got promoted right after I got to the prep school because I had just reached my requirement to pick up corporal, and got promoted there. Got paid as an E4 while at the prep school. But basically, it was a year of school and nothing Marine Corps, other than the fact that I still had to take my CFT and PFT every year.
Got it. Yeah. So before we get to, I mean, I guess that was the year prep school. So before we get to the Naval Academy, let's close out this deployment.
Yeah. So it's a very long deployment. Unfortunately, so it slated to be a 6-month deployment, turned into I think just over a 9-month deployment. We got extended 2 times while we were out there. A lot of close call things happening, but same thing with the Gaza Strip and fighting over there. They said, hey, we're going to do a show of force, and sent us over to do that show of force by just having ships off the coast there. So a lot of time spent on ship, a few good times out in country. We did a few embassy counterinsurgency missions where we went to embassies. That's where I spent my time in Kuwait. We actually went to the embassy out there to do training missions, and it's great deployment. It's just a lot of time stuck on that ship. And when you have different things that happen, when we got extended both times, they go into River City 1, which is basically they shut down all communications on the ship. And, you can't really talk to your family, tell them what's going on. We had actually gotten to a point, at one point, we were eating eggs and rice for basically every meal because the ship had run out of food because it wasn't supposed to be out there and it wasn't slated. So, I mean, that happened for about 3 weeks before they got a resupply for everything that the ship needed to maintain the force out there.
How does that resupply work? Another ship comes?
Yeah. Yeah. So they would do it at sea, pull alongside another ship, and then they'd helicopter back and forth between and set up call. It's a really cool experience. The Marines,
Sure.
we help out while on ship. So at different times, some of the guys would get tasked out to help in different areas on ship to help maintain some of that stuff. a lot of times we would end up helping with those resupplies to just offload and unpack materials, try and help sort through mail. You figure when you're stuck in that type of situation, mail and everything else backs up. So you've got hundreds of packages coming in to try and sort through the ship to get everyone their stuff that they may or may not have ordered.
Yeah, it's a really interesting logistics piece to be involved in.
Yeah, it is. We
Yeah.
we spent probably, I think the longest time that we spent out there was a month and a half in Kuwait when we were offloaded, doing different training operations and different ranges out there. I actually still have a photo of me and my team doing close quarters combat ranges out there in Kuwait. And it's one of my favorite experiences out there. Getting stuck in the sand for the first time. We got our Humvee. I think we had 3 Humvees in a row stuck in the sand in the middle of the desert. It's just an absolute nightmare sometimes.
What'd you do to get it out?
Eventually, we had a guy come out with, I think, a Mat V, which was sits a whole lot higher, does a lot better, and we found a different road around, and they were all kind of chained together, and we got one at a time out. Half the time we were out there trying to dig them out the whole time, just shoveling sand. We spent 2 weeks in Djibouti. That was a whole lot of fun. Because we weren't there with the battalion, right? Since we were our Force Recon attachment, we were there with the Force Recon team. Djibouti's base that we stayed at was an Army, I think it was an Army Air Force joint base. Best chow hall I've ever been to, ever. I mean, it was just phenomenal. They served all the way through midnight. They had midnight rations like you were on a ship, and you get made to order eggs and all the best chow hall I've been to in my entire career.
Nice.
I hadn't seen one in 10 years. I hadn't seen one better than that one in Djibouti.
Nice. So out of curiosity on the taking a step back to just the overall deployment, when you're on a show of force, mission set, what's the atmosphere on the ship? Like what's the perspective out of curiosity?
It really depends. There's a lot of frustration because you don't get the information. When you think about it at the Lance Corporal level, right, you're just not getting the information of what's going on. What are you guys doing? We had, when some of that stuff kicked off, and I'm trying not to mix my deployments up. When some of that stuff kicked off and we were actually on standby for my platoon, you just get frustrated. Right, you spend a year getting ready for a major event. You're ready to go do what you need, needs to be done. We actually got to that instance at one point on that deployment, and we're down in the armory. We're loading up magazines. Right, it's a lot of work to rip out all those boxes when you're on ship, because usually you have to take it off ship to go through ammo and everything else. And we're sitting there loading up. We got full kit loaded up in the well deck, lined up the flight deck ramp to be able to load on helicopters. Force Recon's on the first team, and then we had ourselves. So, weird memories coming back. I know I'm jumping all over the place. So,
no, you're good.
The Libya, I know there's a movie out there from 2012 about the CIA agents and everything that happened in Libya. So it's frustrating, and obviously I don't know the full context. I don't want anyone to think that I do, but I know that as a Lance Corporal, that mission came up right before September 11th, that I was loading magazines in a well deck ready to fly in there to assist with that operation. So it's frustrating to watch some of that stuff because I remember getting briefed in the well deck. This is what's happening. We're going to go secure this embassy. There's a lot of rumors happening that there's going to be an attack on September 11th. It's the anniversary of 9/11. This is going to happen. And I remember sitting there loading magazines in a well deck, Force Recon lined up, ready to go out the door. My squad would have been the second one out to follow them. We were going to secure the embassy, was the original mission, and just show a force at the embassy to prevent anyone from doing anything. Then it turned into, we did that for, I think that whole prep was 36 hours, roughly. where we were sitting down there running back and forth between trying to get meals in before we went out and did anything. And then it turned into, okay, something has finally happened and the embassy's been attacked. Now we're going to go in and we're going to stop the attack on the embassy. And then you sat there. I mean, I remember sitting watching it on the TV in the ship, the news reports about the entire event, and them sit there and talk about how there was no force in the area, none of this stuff. It's like I remember being there. I remember prepping for that mission, and then everyone in the embassy was killed, and it wasn't worth going in anymore. And I don't know the politics behind why that mission didn't get executed or why we didn't go in. You know, that's way above even now. But when you spend all that time prepping to go on deployment and you get lined up to stop an event from happening and you don't get to go, I mean, you've been out there so long, you just got extended. We were all frustrated and angry, to say the least.
Yeah, that's a pretty wild set of circumstances, timing. And, you know, when I was asking the question, show of force, you know, what the atmosphere is like for you guys, you know, I didn't know any of that timing when I asked it.
Yeah.
So now even more so, it's, you know, obviously that's a very frustrating you know, circumstance, particular to you. It seems like to me, even more so now that you just, you know, said the story, it seems like to me that it's just such a, I don't know what to call it, but just a frustrating circumstance, regardless of there being like an actionable that could be had, where, you know, you're sitting out there. It doesn't seem like anyone on land is actually respecting, you know, a fleet on the water.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you're there, but you're not doing anything. And that wasn't
Right.
what we were there to do, right? We were there to do something, to be a presence, to actually, you know, stop or prevent conflict from happening. And it can be a very frustrating experience when you're kind of stuck in that situation, especially after all the time that you've prepped to go take care of things.
Totally. Yeah. Totally sounds like it. So, what else happens on this deployment, or you know, could close it out, whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, that was the most significant event. That one will stay with me for a long time. Especially after they had made it. You know, they made a movie about it and talked about how no one was in the area. Yeah, we were an hour and a half away by bird, and we got prepped for the mission 24 hours in advance. Right, so obviously decisions were made at a much higher level than I can ever fathom. That event as a whole will stick with me just because I know. You know, or at least at my level, it felt like other things could have been done to prevent it from happening, and prevent those civilians from getting killed, as well as any of the CIA agents that were involved in that operation.
Yeah, impossible to understand.
So, but other than that, it was, you know, we stayed out there for a couple more months. I believe we got home just before Christmas that year, and we're lucky enough to get to go on leave for Christmas. I want to say we got home about a week and a half before Christmas, which typically, when you get off a deployment, especially one that long, they don't allow you to go home right away. So I think they had a shortened leave period for us, as they worked through, you know, mental health awareness and everything else they work through when you get back from deployment.
Yeah, nice. So then you get back, you know, you go through your pre-leave segment, you get on leave. I guess the next thing is Naval Academy, correct?
Naval Academy Prep School. So
Right, prep school.
You know, starts June of 2013. So I really spent about 6 months just training for that. Right, my platoon commander knew that's what I was prepping for. Lieutenant Billy Norris, amazing guy. I'm pretty sure he's still in the reserves. Funny story that comes back around with him, but Lieutenant Norris, great guy. He actually played football at the Air Force Academy. At the time, I had said, well, I really want to play football. Never played football before in my life. I really want to play football. So he helped try to teach me a few things, and I really spent probably 6 months there, just weight training, working out, and getting ready for prep school. So I went to prep school in June of 2013. And prep school is really 1 year It's 4 courses, I believe. Your different levels of English, math, science, and physics. So I go to the prep school for that, and it's really all focused around get your SAT score up and get back into a school learning environment with some military things. A little bit weird when you're coming from the enlisted side. So you get most of the prior enlisted go to prep school. Not all of them have to, depending on your SAT scores and things. Mine were low enough for average that I needed to go. We had about 60 prior enlisted Navy and 12 prior enlisted Marines at the prep school. Historically, about half of those will graduate from the academy. So I think 5 prior enlisted Marines graduated from the academy with me of the 12 that were in my class. So went to prep school, met those guys. We all show up about a week early. They do an indoctrination, kind of a watered down version of boot camp for 3 weeks. And it's run by midshipmen from the Naval Academy. So it's not a ton of drill instructors. You have one drill instructor. They do have one Marine drill instructor that serves on that detail that runs the whole program. There's about 250 people that go to the prep school for that first year. And so you do that 3-week indoc period, which is just a lot of memorizing stuff and, them learning ranks and basic drill. And, a lot of those people that go to prep school are student athletes that just need a little bit of help with their grades. And, that gateway is a huge help for those people, right? It was a huge help for me. I would not have made it at the Naval Academy if it wasn't for the prep school. And that was proven my first year at the academy, right? So it really did prepare you in one way or the other, whether you needed the physical help or you needed the educational help. That's what the purpose of that institution was for.
Yeah. So then that's awesome. I mean, yeah, it sounds like it's doing its job. So that's good to hear. So when you get to the academy, both given, this is what you told your dad you wanted to do. And sorry, I can't remember. Did you say your dad went through the academy?
No, he did not go. He was Navy enlisted for 26 years.
Okay. So you just had a desire to do it.
Yeah.
And your perseverance through that, you went through that prep school process. So just an amazing story of finally getting there. How did it feel once you arrived?
Oddly enough, at the time when I arrived, I hated it. I wanted nothing more than to leave. I wanted to be back with the Marines that I spent my career with. So you figure when I got to the academy was 2014, summer of 2014. So I was going through what they call plebe summer, which is a 6-week kind of a mini boot camp again. 6-week period with everyone for your class, over 1,000 people there. All I could think about was that my unit had just deployed to Afghanistan. So the Afghanistan deployment that I was prepping for before I went to prep school that I didn't get to go on. Now all of my friends are in Afghanistan and they're with what's supposed to be the last full battalion for Marines in that fight. And my friends are over there getting shot at, and my friends are over there doing what needs to be done. And I am sitting with a bunch of people complaining about running around or how it's too hot. And it's like, I got frustrated, right? That's one of the reasons they have the age rule at the academy, especially for prior enlisted coming in. I will tell you, I was a terrible mentor and friend or anything to anyone else at the academy when I first got there. And they would tell you the same thing. If you hadn't been through and you didn't know where your friends were at, I didn't care about it. The seniors at the academy were younger than me, right? And they want to tell me about the military life. I'm like, you haven't lived the military life. I've lived the military life. I've been overseas. I haven't seen I had a chip on my shoulder. This is the bottom line. I had a very terrible chip on my shoulder, and I hated it, and I wanted to leave every day, pretty much for that first 6 months, if not a little bit longer. It was unfortunate because I'd worked so hard to get there, but it took me a couple years to get into a position in my mindset to say, I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I stayed. and I'm glad I'm going through it.
Yeah, man, that totally makes sense. Right as you started answering, I realized, I really couldn't imagine anyone not giving the answer that you just gave, given your position, given the situation. So, I mean, even more credit to you for just sticking through it and allowing time to do its thing, allowing yourself to kind of ease through it. So, congrats for doing that, man. That's a lot of perseverance to get there and get through the academy. So tell us a little bit about years 1, 2, etc.
Yeah, and the cool thing to add to that is no one gets through it alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get into the Marine Corps alone, right? I had a guy helping me.
Mm-hmm.
When I got there, I did not get through it alone. There were a couple upperclassmen who were either more relaxed or more understanding, that would help me out. But there were also a couple upperclassmen that were prior enlisted Marines, some of which were prior enlisted Marines who had been in combat multiple times, who would come and talk to me. And I had not been in combat, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had not dealt with any of the things that they had dealt with. It was just the lifestyle change for me, that made it so hard. But they would come and find me during plebe summer and talk to me. And there's a network at the academy of prior enlisted Marines and prior enlisted sailors to help with that issue,
Mm-hmm.
because it is very hard to overcome.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting because if you think about what we will eventually get to is transition period, right? Military to civilian. And it's interesting because this is, it's military to military, right? But it's
yeah,
still a drastic change in, as you just pointed out, right, lifestyle. And nonetheless, even so, it's still difficult, and that makes total sense.
yeah, and I would say, throughout the years there, my mindset shifted, the first couple years, but it took all 4 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was not well liked, by a lot of people my first year. I did not mind yelling at someone over something stupid, that was simple, and I had a bad attitude and I had a chip on my shoulder, and it took a long time to rebuild those bridges and eventually allow people to learn that what I really cared about and what I still cared about today is I just didn't want to see people make decisions that affected others and you not take into consideration, what those decisions do. Right. And it could be as simple as making one squad do fire watch every night for a week, right? And not learning how to rotate it or leaving it up to someone else. It could be the smallest thing, but every decision you make as an officer affects people that are E1s, E2s that are already struggling, and we don't think about the effect your decisions have on others like that. It really bugged me, right? I did
Mm-hmm.
not like the little BS games. If it didn't teach you something about how to be better in combat, or if it didn't teach you anything how to be better as a person, there's little games that happen in fraternities, military, all over. I didn't like it, right? And I vocalized that heavily. Not the best way that I should have. And I learned from that throughout my career, and I got better at addressing it, throughout my career.
Yeah, but I mean, by the way, I also want to give you credit for, as you're mentioning, recognizing it. It was clear to me immediately that you recognized it, right? As you were telling your story in terms of shift in environment, right? Shift in what your day to day was like, and just the ability to realize that and say it in hindsight is very important. I mean, that's the only way you could get over it, right? Is when you could recognize that scenario, and seemingly you did, even within the academy itself. So that's a really important thing. I want to kind of pin or plug once again, because that's a translatable transition, period, um, uh, principle to really remember and think about, because that's critical for all veterans in all stages.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
That
awesome.
type of growth, especially when you get into the civilian workforce and you're working
Mm-hmm.
inside of a company, and you can't just I can't just yell at someone and make them change how they did something, right?
Right.
So you've got to learn how to tailor yourself, but still accomplish what you're trying to achieve, through a more tactical means than you would necessarily have to, coming from the environment that I came from.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. So walk us through a little bit, what the years at the academy were like.
Um, a lot of my time was dedicated to football. I didn't really play. I mean, I was on the team. So I was on the team for about a year. I got injured at the start of the season. I wasn't that great at playing, but yeah, I got fortunate enough to be able to be on the team and be surrounded by a group of guys that just, building that team, it made me feel connected to
Mhm.
them just like I was to the Marines that I served with. So if I hadn't had that environment, I don't know that I would have made it through the academy. And I had some mentors realize that helped keep me on the team. But I got injured freshman year. I tore both my shoulders, and ended up staying with the team as an equipment manager.
Mhm.
So I spent the rest of my 3 years with the team doing that, which was a lot of fun because you still get to go to all the games and you get to help out and be on the sidelines for everything and travel all over. So that was a great experience for me, and that was my way to decompress.
Mhm.
Because if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have had the ability to kind of get away. Um, a lot of people didn't understand why I needed to get away from all the other little plebe things, but the football team did, and those were the guys that I'm closest with that I still talk to today. I'm hoping to go visit a few of them here in the next couple of months that are still in and loving their job in the military. But the
That's
next
awesome.
couple of years were, I mean, it was a struggle mentally and I wouldn't say as much physically, but it was just a struggle mentally to get through and academically.
Mhm.
A lot of the people that get into the academy are just incredibly intelligent, and it's all different ways. Whether it be your math and sciences, there were guys that I met guys that were day trade while in class in the middle of doing something in physics, and this guy's making $500,000 in his English class. And I just, like so far beyond things that I could comprehend on the intellectual level. My freshman year, I got a 1.8 GPA. You're required to have a 2.2 or higher to stay in the academy. So the next couple of years was summer school twice a year because they have four different training sessions during the summer that you go to or you sign up for. I skipped two of them so I could be in class, so I could get my GPA up so that I could stay at the academy. So I
Mhm.
worked from a 1.8, I think, up to about a 2.9 or just shy of a 2.9 to graduate, um, which was for me was the biggest challenge. The summer trainings were, the first couple years were, go spend 3 weeks on a ship, go check out a submarine. It's all designed around showcasing everything the military has to offer, really the Navy and the Marine Corps have to offer, so that you can make a better decision about what type of officer you want to be when
Mhm.
you graduate. So that's what the next 4 years were. It's going through school and it's, what do you want to be when you get out? For me, it was Marine Corps, right? That's where I came from. I'm going to go back to the Marine Corps. I'm going to go back to the infantry no matter what. Um, because that's, I still had some of that amateur, mindset of I'm not going to be a different MOS other than, other than infantry. Cause that's what I did. That's what I know. That's where I'm going to go back to. So the year before senior year, you go through a program that my cousin's currently going through, which is Leatherneck, which is a 3 to 4 week training cycle where they showcase the Marine Corps. So a bunch of midshipmen go out there and they spend 3 or 4 weeks going through the O course, the E course, land navigation, everything that you would have to do if you became a Marine officer. Where you go to the basic school and spend your next 6 months training to be a basically trained Marine infantry officer.
So in that segment for you, I guess you just had to do that again.
Correct. Yeah. So TBS is you have ITB, which is Infantry Training Battalion for Marine Enlisted, and then TBS is the basic school. So there's 6 months of the basic school for all Marine officers. The cool part coming out of the academy is you graduate as an officer at the
Mhm.
academy. So you don't have to go to OCS, which is like basic training for enlisted. And
Got
then
it.
TBS is, you're a basically trained infantry officer. And then you have IOC, which is Infantry Officer Course, which is a 3-month course. If you get selected out of TBS, you'll go to IOC. So while you're at TBS, you'll put in your MOS preference, and then they have the third system that they still run off of, which is depending on where you fall inside of your percentage, will determine, if you get your first, second, or third choice for what MOS you would like. So
how was that course for you?
TBS was great for me, but a little bit bad. I think I set myself back a little bit in the mindset because I got comfortable, right? I worked to grow my mentality a lot through the academy. And then when I got to TBS, I was like, I'm back to being a Marine infantry. This is my stuff. I'm better than you guys at this. I know this, right? Because they don't teach you those skills, Marine Corps skills, at the academy.
Mm-hmm.
You do that training, and then you go to class for another year, and then you graduate, and you're a Marine officer. My frustration with it was that I felt like I hadn't earned it, right? I told you the story about being in front of the Iwo Jima Monument, crying when you get your Eagle Globe and Anchor. There is no Eagle Globe and Anchor ceremony. Before graduation, you buy yourself an Eagle Globe and Anchor, and you put it on your uniform yourself, and now all of a sudden you get a diploma and you're a Marine, right? So
Weird.
When I got out of the academy, it's like I hadn't felt it. And I remember having a conversation with one of the majors at the academy, and I was like, I just don't feel like I earned it, right? Like, I know I did. Like, those guys, everyone at the academy, those 4 years are long. They are very long, and they are not easy, and you definitely earn it. But I had already earned my Eagle Globe and Anchor, and I had been through hell to get it. So that's what I was expecting to feel like when I graduated the academy. And when I graduated, I didn't feel that way. It was kind of a somber event where I was just like, well, I know they all felt like they earned it because they see those 4 years as hell. I saw that as schoolwork.
Right.
And so for me, I just didn't feel like I'd gotten there yet. So in TBS, when I got back to being in the Marine Corps daily, it was, I am a Marine. This is what I do. You guys haven't earned any of this yet. And my whole focus was getting to IOC because even at TBS, I still hadn't felt like I earned anything because I hadn't been through hell to get it. Right. I hadn't been through that physical, mental gut punch that they put you through. And TBS is not easy, but it's more intellectually challenging of operations and prepping for combat and how you train Marines. And, it's just not the same, right? There is no crucible event at TBS. There's plenty of nights in the field and shooting a lot of really awesome guns and blowing stuff up and all types of things, but it's not this grueling gut punch.
Right. So what's that? What's that? Pipeline, or in chronological order. So you finish with the academy, then you go to that TBS school. Is that what that is?
Yep. Yeah. So you finish the academy. If you got selected as a Marine officer, you'd go to TBS. TBS is 6 months long. At roughly 5 months in is when you'll do your career selection. This is what MOS I want. For me, it was infantry. That was my first choice. And right before you finish up TBS, that's when they'll tell you what you got selected for, what school you're going to, and then we'll work on orders and where you're transferring to. I got fortunate enough to get selected for IOC, which is right across the street. It's at Quantico. It was literally the barracks next to me that you go over for Infantry Officer Course, and I started that a few weeks after graduating TBS.
Awesome. So before you get into that course, just wrapping up the academy and that TBS course, what was your mindset at that point?
I was nervous and extremely excited because I knew the guys going there were, everyone there had something to offer and everyone had worked their hardest to get there. And it was a fight to get at IOC. because it really depends on that third system, right? The purpose of the third system is to try and distribute officers evenly across the Marine Corps, so you don't end up with all infantry officers were the top of their class, all artillery officers top of their class, right? They try to distribute it in a different manner to give a fair, an equal opportunity to everyone going there. So I was grateful, I was excited, I was nervous. In the back of my head, I'm like, can I make it as an infantry officer, right? I'll tell you, after the first, they do a screener, right? Your first day is a screener. It is a 24-hour screener. And when I finished up that first day, I asked myself that question: can I make it through this course? Because that was the gut punch I was looking for that whole time.
Right.
So it was good. I was excited, and I said a couple weeks, but I'm thinking back on it, and it was actually, if I remember correctly, the guys that were in my TBS class had to graduate 4 days early from TBS to go to IOC because it was starting that weekend and they needed to fill the class.
Mm.
So I didn't graduate TBS with my class. We did a graduation in the cafeteria at Quantico, and we all went across the street to IOC to start that weekend.
Cool. Yeah. So then, I mean, this is a serious pipeline, right? I mean, it started, pre prep, rather. I was forgetting the name, prep, right? So that was a year. Then you got 4 years of academy. Then you got that TBS school, and now you're going to this iOS school. So that's not easy. That's not quick. Good for you, man.
It's not. It is a very long pipeline. But I can tell you, when I graduated IOC, that was the feeling I had been looking for when I left the academy. Right? I was like,
yeah,
I definitely earned it now. Right?
Totally. Yeah. So walk us through that. Walk us through that course.
So IOC, it's not secretive, but it is very, right. You can't say a lot of the things about it publicly,
Mm-hmm.
like this is how that course runs. But there is a lot of physically demanding, mentally demanding activity. The first 24 hours is a screener, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have a process. I will say that by the end of the screener, I probably didn't have skin on the bottom of my feet for how long of a screener it was. And it incorporates every skill that you're taught as a Marine, right? It incorporates land nav and fighting and hiking, and everything you would need is built into that screener to see if you can tough it out for the next 3 months, because it is a 3-month long course.
Mm-hmm.
You have, in the Marine Corps, you go on different 5, 10 mile, 15 mile hikes. IOC, you do up to a 20-mile hike. And you have certain weight requirements that come with those different hikes. We would weigh ourselves on the scale before the hike. And if your pack is off, or your weight is off by, say you have to carry 100-pound load. If you weigh 99.5 pounds, they make you add 10 pounds to the 100 pounds. And now you have to weigh 110 for the reweigh in, right? But it teaches you attention to detail, the littlest thing like that, about what you should have in your pack before those events. They put you in extremely high stress situations so that you can make decisions that you might have to make if you were leading a platoon. How would you make this decision while you're getting shot at, and while all these things are happening, while you haven't slept in 5 days, 6 days, 10 days of going through? So they really put you to the test, and the majority of your time is in the field. So that 3 months, I think we're in the field for more than 2 of it, of the 3 months. There are no weekends off. It is, you're going through and you're out there navigating something, and really testing your body's physical and mental limits on another level.
Was there attrition? Meaning, did you start with X amount of people and finish with X amount of people?
We started with over 110 and we finished with 44 in my class.
Wow.
I believe. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's got one of the highest attrition rates, or had one of the highest attrition rates. I know Navy SEALs have, I think, a much higher attrition rate than that, but it has one of the highest attrition rates in the military.
I'm sure.
It is. They put you through a ringer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It seems like it. Yeah. That's awesome, man. So you finish up with this course. So 3 months later, what's, one, what's the feeling? And then what happens after that?
I I felt relieved, and just I felt like I'd earned it. Right, it was the
Hmm.
same feeling. I and I remember sitting there when we got done and we were getting assignments to what units we were going to. I just felt like someone handed me my Eagle Globe and Anchor again. Right, I felt like
Yeah.
someone told me like you earned this. um, and there was just this sigh of relief. Ironically, that sigh of relief comes right before they send you to 29 Palms for 2 weeks to do a final training exercise, um, and you spend another 2 weeks out in the desert. Um,
There's always
but
more, right?
there's always more. We got our service assignments, and I was assigned to be a weapons platoon commander at a unit. And got sent to the fleet, and it was a great it was just a great feeling to
That's
finally hit
awesome.
that point in my career.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm sure it was. So you get to, your new assignment. What
Yep.
does that look like?
It's weapons platoon commander, in a challenging situation. There's a ton of hazing and everything else that happens in the military. I know it's not something that's talked about often, but it happens. So I'd been assigned to a unit that had some of that going on. Um, Kind of a tricky situation of where I was at, and the situations I was in. Um, but it was nice to finally get to a position where I could say, hey, how can I help? Right? What can I do to help these guys? We were getting ready for deployment to Norway, I believe at the time. I didn't end up going on that deployment. I ended up going over to Second Marine Regiment to be the headquarters company executive officer. Um, so I did not get to go with them on that deployment, but it was just a lot of training. It was a
Hmm.
lot different environment because you figure by this time it's now 2019, when I'm back in the fleet, and most of the Marines that are in at that point have not been in combat and had not been trained by anyone who had been in combat. So they were 3 or 4 generations removed from that.
Hmm.
So it was a little bit different of training or how you train them. I had not been in combat, right? So how do I train these guys to prep for combat? And I don't have a resource to rely on to help, who has that real experience to teach these guys.
Yeah.
Um, so it was very unique and a challenge that I think we're facing regularly today. Is there just not a lot of young leadership? There's plenty of senior leadership, right? But as a lance corporal, you don't want to sit there and listen to the colonel, who may have that experience and has been through all of those things. You don't even want to listen to the lieutenant. So not having those resources today, I think is, it's not detrimental. It's just difficult.
Yeah.
Um, it,
Yeah. Out of curiosity, I just thought about this right now. I mean, you might have no idea either. Have you ever seen the attempt to, bring in a veteran who, went through combat, went through deployments, et cetera, as like an external uh, consultant, essentially?
I have, and if I was a lance corporal and you asked me that question, I would have said that guy was a great speaker. On
Hmm.
the flip side, as an officer, seeing both sides and being trained directly from guys who had just come back from combat, that guy's mindset was that you need to beat the crap out of each other, and that's how you prep for combat. And it was all about killing, right? And the idea or the purpose of combat is not just to kill someone else in life, right? And so when you teach a 18, 19-year old, even myself, like, what do Marines do? Oh, kill people. I joined the military to kill people. You didn't join the military to kill people, right? You joined the military for, most of these people joined for bigger and better reasons. They joined to
Hmm.
serve, they joined to protect, they joined to and you learn to protect the guys that are with you to your left and right, and that's the reason you do it. But when you get someone who is young and comes directly back from combat and doesn't grow through his leadership, he kind of spreads the wrong message. So I've seen it go good and bad, right? I've had guys that have went through it and been through multiple deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they do a great job talking to these guys about their experience and what it took to prep for that. But I've also seen it go really wrong.
Right.
I think it's a necessary tool that just has to be tailored on who's doing the presentation.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm glad to hear though. At least it is happening and it is working in the circumstances where the person speaking can, relay relevant messages. So at least that. So you get to, I guess you said HQ, right? To be
Yep.
the XO there. What's that like?
That was my all-time favorite position. I was there for over a year, and it's just such a different perspective. That's the perspective that I think really translates to my experience in the commercial construction. Is you have so many different entities that when you're bottlenecked in the infantry, you don't think about all the people supporting. You don't think about supply and motor T and everyone in the background doing all this work to make these events happen, training scenarios happen. You just get to meet a lot of really good people, a lot of really good young Marines that really care about supporting other people.
Yeah.
And that was a great experience. And, I mentioned Lieutenant Norris. Lieutenant Norris is very ironic. This is where the Marine Corps is a small place. The CEO for headquarters company is a guy named Captain Moore. Captain Moore and me still talk to this day. When I was there when he retired. Amazing Marine. Captain Moore was Billy Lieutenant Norris's roommate when Lieutenant Norris was my platoon commander, and they are best friends. So it was a very small Marine Corps because we got to talking when I became his XO, and we both come from 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines. So he was in he was in Bravo Company, I think it was, at 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, and his roommate was Charlie Company as a platoon commander, and now I'm his XO. Lieutenant Norris actually came to my graduation at the Naval Academy. It was just a very small world, and very comfortable. Right, he's one of the best company commanders, if not the best company commander I had ever worked with. And we'll get into it when we talk about the construction side. He actually came to work for the company that I work for when he retired, because I got out right before he retired, and I brought him in with me.
That's awesome.
And he's doing that to this day for another company and loving it.
That's awesome. So I guess this role is this the last role before you finish your service?
I went and served as a CAT platoon commander as well, combined anti-armor and tank platoon commander. It was a great role, great group of individuals. Just not, a little bit different, right? You go from a company of 250, 300 Marines down to about 50 Marines. It's a whole different environment going back into that infantry. So it was a great role. I did that for, I want to say 6 or 8 months right before I got out and decided to start transitioning out of the military and move on with my career. At the time, my wife was living in Virginia and I was living in North Carolina. We just went through COVID and everything else. And it was just, for me, I had felt like I was going to start having to focus on my career more than I was focusing on my Marines. And my whole goal around becoming a Marine officer was that I would focus on the Marines. And if I ever felt like I had to focus on my career more than them, then it was no longer time for me to be a Marine.
So at what point did you, I guess, realize that and realize you're, gearing to finish your service?
It would have happened right around that time as a CAT platoon commander, looking to, transition to another new billet and, move up in rank. And it just didn't feel like a lot of the mentors that I had at the time that were captains and higher they weren't in the day to day with the Marines. They were focused on the bigger picture, which is very much needed. It's just not where I wanted to be, right? I
Yeah.
wanted to be focused with the guys, and you're going to age out of that eventually, right? You have to
Hmm.
either grow or move on. And so it was
Absolutely.
time for me to move on.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I mean, by the way, it's also just very mature realization of the scenario. So that's really cool. And all right, awesome. So you're gearing up to finish your service. Walk us through what that process looks like.
It's gotten a lot better. I'd say the military as a whole has struggled with that. When I got out the first time, um, I got out to go to the Naval Academy and to go to college, and the process that they had in place still made me go to like separation counselors and other things to get out because they didn't recognize, what I was doing in life. Um, when I got out as an officer, it was much more, here's the process for setting up disability claims. Here's the process for going through and I forget the name of the program, but where you can still get paid by the military and go do a program for 2 or 3 months, like
Hmm.
an apprenticeship or something else, internship with a company, so that you could potentially have a job. Skill Bridge. So they have a skill bridge program, and they set you up with different companies or networks, and let you go work with that company for 2 or 3 months while still getting paid by the Marine Corps, and allow you to really learn that job before you get there to help you be comfortable with that potential role.
Cool.
So that's a really great program. Um, there's still some work to be done in it, but
Hmm.
that transition was a lot easier the second time around, because that program was now in place.
Yeah. Is that specific for officers or is that
No,
anyone
that's for
finishing?
everyone.
Mm.
Everyone can do skill bridge. Now, the flip side of that is your command has to sign off on it. For an officer, it's a little bit easier. For enlisted, it depends on your performance, a
Mm.
little bit more. So that can be the tricky part. And then if officers really understand the program, and there there's a block that I think that some officers, I'm not going to say a lot, some officers have when Marines, anyone in the military gets out. And it's all right, well, he's getting out. He doesn't want to be in the military. Your mindset can go two ways. It can be, screw that guy. He doesn't want to be a part of the organization, and throw him to the wolves. And then there's officers, and something that was taught to me, and Captain Moore instilled it in me, is our job is to help, whether you're in the military or not, right? You help the Marine live a better life. So my focus was always, if you said you wanted to get out, great. What are you going to do when you get out?
Hmm.
If you don't
I
know,
yeah.
then I'm here to help. If you
I
do
really
know,
appreciate that.
I'm here to support.
Yeah, it's this kind of this concept if you think about it, like pay it forward, right? You do that, you got veterans finishing their service and going into civilian life with a better kind of like taste in their mouth, right? And then maybe they tell someone else, right, a friend's kid or whatever, just someone they come across, ask about their service. Now they've left with with a positive attitude, and that again just pays it forward. So I think that's a really important approach to take. Yeah, very well said. I'm glad that that's your takeaway, and I hadn't thought about that either, and that kind of dynamic, and you just helped me kind of
It's
like I guess produce that thought. So that's cool.
it's frustrating to watch anyone try and talk anyone in the military to stay in the military for the purpose of staying to serve them or serve the institution,
Hmm.
right? That life has to move on, right?
Yeah,
Whether you stay in 20 years, you stay in 4 years, right? You did your service, and now our job's to support you into integrating and becoming better and helping better society, right?
totally.
Because that opportunity exists out there. And I think that mindset is shifting quite a bit now. But I still see it, to this day. If people get out, when you leave a company, you see it, right? Well,
Yeah,
why would you leave? Why would you, why are we not good enough or anything else? They just, all right, well, he put in his 2 weeks notice. Let's just cut him loose now, right? No
yeah,
matter how much he's done for that company. So it's a shame to see that mindset, and I think that we would have a lot more productive military members in the civilian side if we truly helped them navigate the process.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's
Well said.
something I
Agreed.
think they're actually trying to work towards, but we're not quite there as an organization. But I think that progress is being made.
Yeah, I mean, so long as progress is being made, because you really just can't expect such a massive organization to flip a switch and all of a sudden it'd be better. So if it's tracking in the right direction, that's good. Glad to hear that. So what's the process look like for you? Like, you finish service. Do you do that skill bridge opportunity?
I do. I
Awesome.
did skill bridge. Ironically enough, I did not do it for construction. I did it for life insurance. So I had gotten my license as life insurance sales, and I was working for a company, and it was okay. And I did that for about 2 months, and I kind of just recognized, like, hey, I'm not a sales guy. I don't want to be a sales guy. It's like life insurance, I think, is very important. It taught me a lot about some finances and other things. So I
Sure.
think it's an important tool to have for your family, but I don't want to go sell people life insurance. So
Yeah.
that's when I had made my decision, kind of at the end of that skill bridge. I'm going to start looking for something in construction. I did construction growing up. It's something that I can put on my resume. It's something that I feel comfortable with. I love building stuff. I build stuff all the time. I grew up building cars. I grew up remodeling homes and different things. So for me, it was like a natural. Let me shift gears.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the officers that had helped me with my skill bridge program referred me to a recruiting company, and that recruiting company helped get my resume out there and get some interviews set up with some large construction firms. At the time, I had actually gotten an interview and actually got a job offer with Hensel Phelps.
Mm-hmm.
They've been around since the early 1900s, I think 1910 roughly. So they've been around a long time, great company. They had offered me a position as a project engineer. And I accepted the position, but actually didn't end up starting work there because I had gotten into this, I want to go do construction. Well, where's the military help? I think the military, one of the biggest things about the military in general is the network and doors
Mm-hmm.
it can open, because in the civilian workforce, they see the discipline, they see the hard work, they know what it takes for you to succeed in the military, and they're hoping that you're going to bring that to their company.
Right.
So I had my wife's friend from her work. Her brother was the vice president of construction at KCG
Mm-hmm.
Construction, where I currently work. He was an former army officer, and he knew I had no real construction experience, but he was trying to build a team. And she said, "Hey, he's flying into Virginia this week. You guys need to have dinner. Just have dinner. You don't start your other job for another month. Go have dinner together." And we went and sat down and we had dinner, and um, kind of turned into an interview, and he made me a job offer while we were at the restaurant. So
That's awesome, man. Those are always how you get the best outcomes. Honestly, you get that connection right through someone in this case, family, and you never know where that will lead exactly. And what happened to your story, and that's really awesome. In this time frame, in this period, what's going on. I'll call it on the personal perspective or psychologically as you're shifting from military to civilian. How's that look for you?
the the most difficult part, I feel like, is that you kind of lose the connection that you had to that environment, right? You're it's almost like me transitioning from the active duty into the academy feeling,
Mm-hmm.
where I just felt frustrated. Right, I don't know how to talk to people in a more politically correct manner. I'm a little bit rougher around the edges. Um, it was I don't think I left my house much, if any, to go out or do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't feel like I had the group of people. Right, when I'd go out in the Marine Corps, there was a group of us. Right,
Yeah.
we were a family, and I didn't feel like I had that. I think some of that translates over, and you'll find that in some environments in the civilian sector. But when you first transition out, that was the biggest loss that I had, was not feeling connected to anyone. And
Yeah,
go ahead.
what you were saying, when you went to the academy and then you found your place on the football team, and that gave you that kind of tribe per se or community. I thought right away, like, yeah, it was it's such a great, like, I don't know, comparison or mid military career, setting you up for success into civilian life, where clearly, right, you recognize these shifts that weren't easy, same as shifting to civilian. Were you able to find like any kind of, I don't know, hobby, community, tribe per se?
Not not really not right away.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, a big aspect is my my whole headquarters company, our whole staff, the other three retired. So my company gunny, my first sergeant, and my CO, they all retired from that. So we have a group chat. We still have a group chat. They just sent me some photos. Chad did, our old first sergeant. So we have a group chat that we keep up with. My company guns drives up to Virginia every once in a while to do some events. He works as a contractor, so we meet up every once in a while. Being near Quantico is helpful because I run into different Marines and
Mm-hmm.
everything. That's been beneficial. But I'll say that's the one piece that I don't think I've fully found is that tribe, of really reconnecting that group, because it when you're on the inside of the military, that when you go home, the biggest frustrating thing is that when you go home for those 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever your leave period is that you truly have that 2 3 weeks off. So you're trying to spend time with everybody, and you're running around and going to spend time, but they don't always make the same time for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, right. And what I realized is now I'm on the opposite end of that, where I'll reach out to some of my fellow officers and enlisted and guys that I want to go see or hang out with, and they just don't have the ability to. And then when they take off the time, if I don't take off that time to meet with them, then it's really on me, right? So I'm kind of on the flip side of that coin. And I found a little bit of a network in the construction industry as a whole. Is when you're working on a project together, that group of guys becomes
Mm-hmm.
your group, right? The
Totally.
project I'm working on right now in Woodbridge, Virginia, whether those guys realize it or not, like, those are the guys I lean on for that group setting. When I go up to the job site and I'm with them all day, like, that's when I feel connected to something. And
Totally.
that's really helped my mentality in the industry.
Yeah, that very very well said, and that's why I love the bringing awareness around the industry, AEC in general, built environment in general, is because of exactly what you said. Is you have the opportunity to find that peer group, right, that tribe, and alleviate some of the gap that happens when finish military service and go into civilian life. So yeah, very well said. So on that front, looking back in hindsight, and this still applies to today, right? It's not specific to the moment that you finish. So just generally speaking, from your knowledge now in hindsight, what would you tell your younger self as advice on that transition period?
I'd say to make time and reach out to more people. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's almost like I relied for too long of a time. I relied on them to reach out to me, and I said that they're not reaching out because they don't want to spend time with me. And I kind of blamed them for
Mm-hmm.
me not reaching out. Right, the networks are out there. The people are there. They haven't gone anywhere. They just, as you grow and they grow in their career, sometimes people move on. But some of those people still want to and still will spend time with you. And I can tell you, that platoon I talked about when I was enlisted, the trailer platoon. I could call any one of those guys right now, and it would be like we were hanging out yesterday. I hadn't talked to
Mm-hmm.
any one of them in maybe 8 or 9 years. But we were so close as a family. A couple of them I keep up with on Facebook, but we will come together in a heartbeat. It I didn't tell the story, but it happened at the academy. We thought we had a buddy that was going to commit suicide. Um, None of us had talked in 3 or 4 years. I was at the academy at the time, and we're all in different units doing different things. One of them became a sheriff down in Texas. Um, but one of the guys was having some issues and uh, called me. I was on the phone with him for 2 hours. While I'm on the phone, I'm going back and forth with text message thread and a group of like 6 of us. And a couple of the other guys are on the phone trying to get contact with the local sheriffs to get out to his house, just to stop whatever we thought was about to happen. So the network is there. You don't always realize, that those guys still care about you, but when you go through something like that, it comes to the forefront that those guys are there. This recently, I don't know any of the guys in this email thread, but a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, General Mullen passed away. General Mullen was previous training and education command 2-star general, retired in 2021. I think 2021. I could have my date wrong. Yeah, a little bit before 2021, because I remember him coming out and speak to my platoon. He's a mentor. He's a friend of mine. I've known him for the last 5 years. He emailed me and 60 other people, invited us to a conference for the United Freedom Fund up in DC back in March. I hadn't seen him in a couple months. He'd been back and forth to Ukraine to talk about the war over there. And he sent this mass email like, hey, everyone apologize for the group email thread, just invite you guys to this conference. So I registered. It's an hour away. I love seeing General Mullen. He's a great guy. He's been a great mentor, great friend, coach, just absolutely amazing person. So I went up, hung out, saw him at the conference, asked questions at the conference, and, hung out for a few hours and met some of the people that were on that email chain. He passed away the week before. Let's see, his funeral was last Monday. So he would have passed away roughly the 13th of this month. He was found dead in the classroom on 29 Palms. It was not public until July 17th via the Marine Corps Times. I found out through the United Freedom Fund July 15th, late that night, July 16th. And I sent an email to that group. And I look, I don't know what happened. I don't know, obviously no one knows the specifics. And I don't know anyone in this group thread. But I knew General Mullen. And if he cared about every one of you, and the way that I knew I cared about him, right, I just want to say I'm sorry. And, I'm sorry for your loss. I didn't know if there was family in the email. I didn't know anything. That email thread's still going on about people sharing stories with General Mullen about how they knew him, who he was to them. It's just a great way for his memory, but that group exists. Those people exist. You just got to communicate, right? That network of people, that tribe is everywhere. It's every person that's ever been in the military at any point. There are retired generals, retired colonels, active generals in that group email responding to some guy, some lieutenant that got out of the Marine Corps that knew him for 5 years. There's guys that have known him for 35 years in that email thread responding. And it's just a wonderful thing to know that tribe exists. You just have to be willing to be the one that reaches out to it.
Yeah, very well said, man. Sorry to hear your loss, and really our loss, right? To lose a person like that, that's our loss as a nation. Really amazing story. Happy to hear that. Your initiation, to your point, right? Sometimes you got to just be the one to make some effort, put in some effort, and look at the outcome, right? I mean, you created a thread of memories for him, and that's amazing. What I always like to say, and always like to kind of think about, post service, and as you move further away from it, is looking back in hindsight along the lines of what you're talking about here. Is everyone's got their lives going on, right? So if you're the one to kind of recognize that you can make effort, you can take effort and do something, reach out to someone, create a group, meet up with people, whatever it is, you don't necessarily have to have an expectation, but that will lead to, creating this dynamic of other people around you, tribe atmosphere. You'll realize other people do care. Other people do have similar, struggles, thoughts, etc. So it's really important, feedback and advice for any of our listeners. So thank you for that story.
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. So looks like we're going to the career side. Talked about how you got your job, which is awesome. I want to give you a plug to highlight any career wins.
So my biggest career win is just happened, and
Awesome.
in my opinion is so I started in construction January 2022, working as a project manager. I'm now a senior project manager for my company. I've been with them for 2.5 years now, going on 3 years. I am the longest standing person in the construction side of the company. There's a lot of turnover in the construction industry. But 2 years ago, I got the opportunity to start my first project. So I finalized the budget. And I've written every single contract for the project. And it takes a team, right? I'm not the only one on the project, but I am the one running it right now. And that project has 2 buildings, 250 units, $50 million build. The first building was supposed to turn over July 1st this year, and the second building is supposed to turn over December 1st this year. Construction is not, it's not perfect. It doesn't go right all the time. We had several months of delays on both those buildings. But we turned over the first building on June 28th.
That's amazing, man.
So we turned it over on time. It's been accepted by property management. They're going to start moving residents in the next week. And the project was on budget, right? So for my first real, this is your baby, you write these contracts, you're liable for it, has been a success so far. And the other building is tracking to be done a few weeks early. We're actually hoping to hit about a month early on the schedule for the next building.
That's awesome, man.
That type of win really keeps you going in the industry.
Absolutely. Yeah, congratulations. That's big accomplishments, especially for it being, your first project that you're fully running. So yeah, congrats, man. That's awesome. So closing out our professional side of the show, I want to highlight any translatable skills that come to mind. You did mention a bunch, as we're just talking and going through your story, but just give this the opportunity to really highlight any key translatable skills that come to your mind.
The biggest one is got to be discipline. My old CEO always, every time he said it, and it still sticks with me, is just brilliance in the basics, right? You have basic functions that you have to do. Learn those basic functions. And if you're really good at those basic functions, your owner, your boss, your president, whoever it is, they're going to see how good you are at those things. And then they're going to task you with more responsibility and allow you to grow within it, right? I focus really on what is my basic function, taking care of pay applications, change orders, contracts, little things that are my day-to-day with building. The discipline that I have and being brilliant at those little things allows me the freedom to build and grow and learn more in the industry, because he doesn't have to worry about the fact, am I doing my job, right? He knows I'm doing my job. Now he's just trying to help me grow the company even more by steering me to other items.
Very well said. That's a great example of, when veterans come out of the military and they think, what's going to translate? You got to think about principles that will really always translate to life. And exactly what you just said, right, is discipline. Now you take those principles and you got to think, all right, how do these principles apply to my day to day? And that's exactly what you just said. And I think it's a very relatable, very translatable, regardless of position or industry that you're in. That certainly translates. So yeah, very well said, man. So closing out, we're going to hit on the last 2 questions. We'll start with wellness practice. What does that look like for you?
For me, I still sometimes I wait till the afternoon, but I still PT first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
Not as rigorous as I would have. I'm not up at 4:30 and at the barracks at 5 and PTing, but I'll get up at about 5:30, 6 o'clock, go to the gym for an hour, really get my head right. Right, I
Mm-hmm.
have to. For me, I have to do that one thing. I do it 4 to 5 times a week, where I'm in the gym. I do amateur bodybuilding. I do that really once or twice a year. I'll get on stage, and it just really refocuses. It gives me a goal, like a
Yeah.
true goal that I can hit that year. That whether it's I've gained a little bit of weight because I'm sitting in an office a little bit more, or whatever it is, it really just gets me out of the house, gets me focused on myself and building. And you got to learn to be a little bit selfish with your own personal growth. And that's the time that I do it. Right, no one bugs me. I put my headphones in and I go, and I'll put a hoodie on and I'll go to the gym, and I really just get my day started the right way. And after so many years of doing that in the Marine Corps, personally, I just can't. Like, it's almost 6 o'clock here. If I went to the gym right now, I'd be awake until 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Right. So, for me, I've got to hit it first thing in the morning, get my body going, and get ready for the day.
Yeah, I agree, man. I'm the same way. That's awesome. Cool. So last but not least, any book or books you'd like to recommend?
My favorite book, I keep it right here, right next to my drawer, is James Kerr Legacy. It really talks about culture change. The culture exists everywhere, right? Every organization you go to, whether you want to call it, if you're self-employed, if you're an entrepreneur, it doesn't matter what you're doing. There is a culture somewhere, and I always felt this book really kind of walked you through how to build a good culture. Right? It's not the perfect culture, and it's not going to work in every situation. I used this book. I used to keep this book with me when we go out to the field, and I'd leave it out for the Marines for them to read a chapter, and we would go over a chapter, and we'd sit down and we talk about the different things that it talked about in the book about responsibility. It talked about the little things. One of the conversations I've had with my VP, I've actually recommended this book to him, is being willing to sweep the shed. It's one of the first chapters in the book, where it talks about being a senior leader, but still being the one to go out and sweep the shed. Right, you're doing the lowliest task to really understand. You don't have to do it every single day. You don't have to be the guy that does it every single day. But when the guys see you doing it, right, it changes their perspective of you. That you're really willing to do what seems like the lowest or worst thing that needs to be done. I think my VP recently did it, where our company was facing some difficulties along the way, and people at the very top didn't really realize what people at my level were dealing with. So he started to come down and do some of the basic functions of my job, and then he had a new perspective on what we were facing and how he could help change some of that.
It's really interesting.
I love the book. I love some of the ways it talks about culture and how to change them, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it does a great job about focusing on the right thing to do, and focusing on the team.
That's awesome, man. That's definitely going on my list. That book will be in the show notes. Billy, thanks so much for coming on the show, brother. Thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me, Adam. It was a pleasure. I know we went a little bit over time here, but it was, I'm sure we could share stories for hours going on. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure we can. Best of luck, brother. We'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.Jet.Build.